Call. Motion passes. Deb, would you read the mission statement, please?
Sure. The Brookings School District prepares all learners to be confident, engaged citizens, empowered to impact the ever-changing and interconnected world.
Thank you. Now we need to identify any conflicts of interest. Do you have anything on your desk, Clint?
This is Clint, and no, we do not. Can you hear me okay? I wanted to check that before we proceed much farther into the meeting. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can hear you fine.
Very good. And before we go any farther, Van, if I might, I would just like to remind everybody that may be viewing at home that this is a public meeting of the school board. We are adhering to the open meeting laws. Our building is open. However, we would ask that if individuals have public comment, they can submit any public comment through the district website. There's a link there that says Ask the Superintendent a Question, and that is certainly an opportunity for individuals to engage with the board this evening if there is a question that they wish to ask.
Okay, thank you for that help. Do we, excuse me again, do we have anything we need to deal with on the conflict of interest side, Clint?
No, we do not.
All right. Are you aware of anybody that has submitted anything electronically, Brian or Clint? This is in the area of comments from the audience.
No, we have not received any public comment.
Okay. We'll go now into board communication. Maybe if you would, Clint, just read down the list so we can sort of be with you and jump in when we need to.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly, I can do that. As we look at our agenda, this is the time when if there's any board communications, and as we do that, let me go to my overarching agenda. I apologize.
I seem to have mislaid mine too, unfortunately.
So the first one is the Performance Oversight Committee. I don't think they've met. Facilities and construction, there was a brief meeting that occurred via Zoom to discuss ongoing developments with the Mickelson site. I don't know if Wes or Melissa would care to comment on that much at this point in time. I do anticipate, board members, that we will have an executive session at our workshop meeting to talk further about some closeout items relative to the project in the first couple of phases. I don't envision that we would deliberate on that much tonight, but I don't know if there's other things, Wes or Melissa, you wanted to comment on.
Well, we had discussions on change orders, which has prompted some board action, and just the progress reports from the architect and the contractor that has been going on since the last regular board meeting.
The next item would be Policy and Governance Committee, which has not met. The next is Human Rights Ad Hoc Committee representation. The next one is the Intergovernmental Relations, and that committee has not met. I know there's been a number of intergovernmental communications that have occurred, but nothing specific to committee action or activity. I would just report that there have been ongoing and continual communications between the school district, the city, Brookings Economic Development. We've been engaged with Brookings Health Systems as well, talking about ways that we can work together and support each other as we continue to go through these times. So nothing more to report other than that at this time. The next,
I would support that. I would support that position. We have had, I have just individually had plenty of contact with the other governmental agencies, and we're all in it together, and we're doing a good job of rowing the boat in the same direction, I believe.
the next item would be the Mental Health Coalition.
They are meeting next Wednesday. We're having a virtual meeting. I know there's some big concern about mental health issues due to people being at home with their families all day, and people having lost jobs, that kind of thing, or not working. So I'm sure those will be topics of discussion at next Wednesday's meeting.
When is the time and place of that, Deb?
It's at noon, and it will be a Zoom meeting, a virtual meeting, at noon on Wednesday, the 22nd.
Or 22?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right, the next item is the Negotiations Ad Hoc Committee, and that's a committee of the whole of the board. We have not met. We do have an item for discussion later on in the meeting this evening to talk about moving negotiations to a date yet to be determined in June. That's being driven predominantly by the fact that we have heard it on multiple occasions, confirmed with a couple of our locally elected officials that there will be a special legislative session in June. And while the governor did sign the 2% into law, there is questions about the viability of that going forward. So that's the extent of the Negotiations Ad Hoc Committee. I have been in communications with BEA. There's a couple of items language-wise that we've been working on. One of them is updating some language with our grievance procedures, and the other is to update and make some language improvements and present them as a shared approach with our mentorship program that we implemented a couple of years ago. So that's what I can report there. The next one is just general board communications. If there are none, then the next item is the Ad Hoc School Finance Ad Hoc Committee, and I know that committee did meet actually earlier this week. So Van, Wes, Brian, I don't know if there's anything you would wish to report.
Well, it's true that we've met a couple times since the last board meeting. Right now, I think the only thing that we could say is that we're aware of the fact that there may be a change in our financial status vis-a-vis the special session that is undoubtedly going to take place in June. In addition, that kind of spills over onto our discussion of the general budget and the capital outlay, but nothing of any concrete substance could be discussed, I think, this evening. Do you have any other take on it, Wes?
Well, just to add that we're fully aware of the balances, the fund balances that we've had that are going to be important in the short run, as we might have some revenue shortages or whatever. So we're keeping an eye on our fund balances and whatever plan we can do in light of the state's fiscal situation and local property tax and whatever. So it's all kind of in motion.
Yeah, and that's going to be a little bit. That'll be a theme that will come up later in this evening's meeting, I think, too, without concrete itemization. But there'll be some general discussion about that, I think. So you're right, Wes. Okay, that takes us to 6.9, and I think. Unless there are any questions from any of the members of the board, it's time to ask you to take the lead on 6.10, which is the superintendent's message.
Yeah, and I'll go into a few items through the administrative report and highlight, and certainly we'll stand ready to answer any questions board members might have, as we do every other board meeting. As you can see in my report, there are a number of things to highlight. We've been in communication with Beta. They have received an FTA planning grant, so that grant is to help offset costs for a related services to help do some planning with a transportation facility. So they are pushing the RFP for somebody to help with the planning out into the marketplace. So that's good news. It's come a little bit later than what Beta had hoped, but I think given all the other challenges and the dynamics of what's happening and impacts to our governmental agencies, certainly not a surprise that has come at a later date than what was originally expected. There's a couple other things you'll notice later on in the board meeting. There's some discussion or an item to defer the MOU or extend that to the 21 school year. We have continued to work on the discussions relative to the lab school. However, again, given the major disruption that's occurred, there's been some delays, obviously, in what we've been able to do relative to the lab school. Deb has actually taken some involvement and leadership and support of kind of advancing some of that conversation, so that's been positive. And again, just trying to keep things moving in a forward-thinking direction with the lab school, with the SD issue. And the existing MOU states that it does come to a close, that we would endeavor to have an MOU to replace the existing MOU in June of 2020. Well, that's not going to happen, so that's why the action that you see this evening is being presented. We talk a little bit about the school district budget. We have had a few different budget meetings. When I say we, the administrative team, we actually have a meeting planned tomorrow. One of the things that has been a significant item of discussion over the last several months, and I really applaud in particular Shelley Jensen for her leadership in this area, and that's the alternative school. We have moved with earnest forward with the intent that we would have, with all intent and purposes, an alternative school in place starting for the 2021 school year. However, given some of the recent developments that have been occurring, we understand that reality is probably going to have to be put on hold for now unless there's a real compelling argument from the board otherwise. And it's simply a reaction to what's going on. And not only would the lab school be impacted, but in some of the preliminary work that we've discussed, there have been some other things that have been discussed to be included and incorporated in the budget. And frankly, I don't know that we would add anything at this point in time. We may be in a position where we'll actually have to start considering reductions of some sort, again, contingent upon what might happen with the whole process with the special session. One other bit of news that I would like to share that I just actually heard today, there are some federal funds that are being released to school districts. It's going to be expected that those are expended by the June 30 of 21. They're going to be allocated to school districts based upon the Title I formula. We're awaiting some further guidance relative to how those funds can be utilized. The funds are significant, and when I say significant, our early estimations or expectations are it's approximately $390,000 for the Brookings School District. We're awaiting further guidance from the State Department of Education. There are some stipulations on how those funds might be used, but board members, I want you to be aware of that in case you start to hear some news of federal funds coming to the school district. That is up on the State Department of Education's website now, and like I said, we're awaiting further direction on how those funds can and might be utilized. You've heard me mention before the transitions and the changes that we're going through right now. Certainly, this is an unprecedented time. I'm hopeful that we can keep an eye to the future, and as such, one of the things that I also wanted to report, we have been working in earnest to find a way to continually recognize our students, particularly our graduating students. And we actually worked together, Dr. Von Fisher, Dr. Jensen, and myself. There was a survey that was issued out to our families, students and parents of seniors for this year, asking for some input relative to graduation. Overwhelmingly, the response was a very strong desire to do some sort of live event. The question comes on when and if we can do a live event and how that might look, and adhering to the social distancing recommendations from the CDC and the State Department of Health. So there are a number of ways that we're starting to look at how we might be able to do that. And parents even said, even if the ceremony would get pushed into August, there's an interest in trying to do something, and if that is not plausible, then the fallback should be some sort of a virtual ceremony. But the feedback overwhelmingly from our parents was to do something in a ceremonial live event. So we are moving forward, looking at some sort of action plan, and I envision that by the end of this month, we'll have something very concrete that we can share with our public on how we're going to fulfill the desire to do a ceremonial recognition of our graduating seniors. It would really be a shame if we didn't. So again, I wanted you to be aware. I know we've had a number of parents that have asked the question on what we're doing, and I really feel that we're committed to recognizing the contributions and success of the class of 2020 as they conclude their educational endeavors at the Brookings School District, and that's a commitment we want to follow through on. Moving to the high school report, you can see there's a number of things that they talk about as they close out. We have declaratively said that we will not hold a school district sponsored prom. If there's some sort of event that can be held after the school year, it certainly won't be something that is school sponsored, simply because it extends beyond contracts and the times that we have. We have to adhere to what our vendors provide us, and we would typically hold part of the prom obviously at Swiftel, and that's not available. So again, we're looking at not having prom. That's a decision that's been made. Advanced placement testing there's been accommodations that have come forward from AP to accommodate our students with advanced placement. And we have at the high school and frankly all of our other buildings limited access to those buildings significantly, simply because it's practicing the safety and social distancing. National Honor Society was scheduled to hold their induction banquet. They are looking to do some sort of virtual banquet to recognize our new inductees into the National Honor Society going ahead. In the middle school report, there's a couple of things just highlighting their ongoing efforts to move forward with adding another team for the MCL at the next grade level, and then the work that they're continuing to do with the levels with language and the language arts program and reading programs. I think that's a great commitment because it does speak to the need to meet all of our learners where they're at. The Camelot report, a lot of video clicks or links in that report. There's some really neat things. I hope board members, you've had a chance to go and explore how our students are interacting. You can see a Padlet, for example, and different projects that students have done and how they've uploaded those. And I think it's really fascinating to see how social media provides for those engagement opportunities when it's used appropriately. You can see similarly in our Dakota Prairie as well as our Madera reports a similar type of approach, and Hillcrest as well, on how they're utilizing social media to outreach with the different families and students utilizing our technology. There's a number of different uploads that are being made with book reads and interactions with students. A very special book, actually, for Dakota Prairie, if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, is a book that was written called The Big Yellow School. So it's the story of the Big Yellow School, and it's narrated by Mrs. Gerard, and it has some illustrations by the students, so a fun story recognizing Dakota Prairie in this time. Hillcrest, you've heard me talk about how they're working to connect with students. There's some information in both the Hillcrest as well as the Madera report on some of the identified facility needs. I know that that's something we're talking about continually. And again, I wanted to highlight those items just for your reference, board members, as well as our community, that we are continually mindful of those ongoing facility needs and working a plan to address those needs through our ad hoc finance subcommittee. And then the pickup and transition of materials is occurring at each of our schools, and how those items are being shared back with families. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, you'll be getting more information, board members, about our kindergarten enrollments. We know how important it is to continually track those. We haven't had a kindergarten screening. We're talking about how we might move forward with some sort of a screening event, and talking to some other districts that have tried to do some sort of a survey approach or some sort of a interactive through Zoom or some sort of interactive format like that. We do know that we want to continue with some sort of screening opportunity, and it may actually be something that we push into next school year if we have to. Director of Curriculum Instruction and our continuous improvement report. We've celebrated the fact that the state is waiving a number of those functions that we've had to adhere to for accountability in the past, one of those being the state assessments. We're pleased because we know that students would certainly be impacted in their assessment outcomes. There are a couple other big things that were in adoption processes. One we're hitting the pause button on, and the other one we're going to continue to move forward on. The math adoption, we're pushing the pause button on, simply because there's a lot of learning that's going on in terms of what sort of format and adoption we would like to have relative to the event that we're experiencing right now. And the learning management system, we have received feedback from parents. There's been some frustration about the fact that we don't have one district-wide universal learning management system, and parents, as they're helping their children at home and working collaboratively with the teacher, they're having to learn different formats, and it's been confusing. So the relevance of having a singular learning management system in the district has never been more important than what it is today. So we're going to move forward with the adoption of a singular learning management system. Special education, special services report. That has been as dynamic as ever. We continually are getting input and advice from the State Department as well as the federal level on how we can continually provide services and what we might have to do on the backside of the at-home placements that we're dealing with right now. Our director there, Mrs. Otheim, has been absolutely a rock star in her communications with her staff and the staff communications with parents and reaching out and connecting with families through the special education areas. Activities have changed dramatically as a direct result of this. We know that there are a number of things that have been called short. You'll notice in the activities report a number of items that are being presented forward, some changes, impacts within the activities arena at the state level. And the other thing that is going on right now is Randy Soma is working with his activities leadership team to determine how we can best find a way to recognize, much like we're talking our academics, the athletics and the athletic accomplishments of our students, which we have typically done at the end of each school year as well. Child nutrition services, there's an attachment that provides some overview of our meal delivery services, and I'm absolutely proud as can be and delighted to share, board members, that We're delivering meals to over 750 students each and every day. It's a phenomenal collaboration between our child nutrition services and our transportation services. And in total, we are serving over 900 students a day because we still have some students stopping by a couple of attendance areas picking up meals. So hats off and kudos to those that are preparing meals and continually delivering those meals. It really helps our community as a whole when we talk about being homebound and food and nutrition insecurity. So again, I cannot say enough about how Laura has worked with the entire child nutrition staff, and Bill has worked with the transportation department to make that happen. Speaking of making things happen, in the technology services report, we surveyed parents to validate what we had found from students, and we prepared around 400 devices to be ready to distribute to families that needed them. Our team just did a phenomenal job as well of working with Swiftel Communications along with ITC Communications to help individuals that may need some technology access by ensuring that they had an internet to the home. We've also purchased and disseminated 125 Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the community. And we know that one of the challenges that we found with those is they have limitations on bandwidth and on the availability of data. So we've had to work with our families and communicate with them on how to manage some of those data services that they may not have otherwise had. We've had some conversation about how we can continue those services going forward into next fall, if indeed we need to. So that's something that we have to be mindful of and thinking about. And in the context of working collaboratively across intergovernmental agencies, we were contacted by Brookings Health Systems looking to see if we could lend them some of our iPads. They want to use them for communications with patients to families. And Jason and his team wiped 30 iPads and are making those available to Brookings Health Systems so they can utilize those in their system to help patients communicate with families because of limitations on visits. So again, I just applaud our teams for stepping up and filling in space where they need to. Grounds work is moving forward. As you see from Bill's report and some work happening with the old tennis courts, we know that we have a number of projects that have already started cleaning the buildings and getting in and doing some access points that otherwise would be delayed. So that's been good, and I think there may be some opportunities to look at some other projects this summer that could be accomplished. And then finally, the Director of Business Services reports. We've been monitoring a lot of COVID compliance issues. There's been some requirements for leaves that have been updated and changed very rapidly that we're responding to, making certain that we're in compliance. And then obviously we've been monitoring with the state on a weekly basis. We've engaged in conversations with the State Department of Education, State Department of Health, just continually getting information to make certain that we're on the edge of everything that we need to in terms of our response as a district. The last thing I wanted to share is that work agreements and contracts have been issued. We utilized a process where we've issued those items and identified, and this was in collaboration with BEA. We sought their input, and they were in agreement that this would be a prudent way to do it. And we just earmarked or identified that salary would be contingent upon final negotiations. So those are all in process right now as well, so that's good. I guess those are all the things that I wanted to highlight. If there's anything that I can answer questions on, I'd be happy to do so.
Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, do you want to keep going then, Clint?
This is where we would have Brian give a little financial overview for an update for the month. So
him to do 6C. All right, go ahead. 6.24.
Correct. All right, just very briefly, on the board summary report, I wanted to point out that our bank franchise receipts came in, and they were almost $62,000 over our budget amount of $275,000, so that's good news on the revenue front. And our health insurance, self-insurance, health and dental fund continues to have more revenues than expenses, so good news there as well. And then before I bring up if there's any questions on the bills, I wanted to ask one favor. With this COVID, I typed up the minutes from the April 3rd meeting, and I would ask that the board, when you approve the consent agenda, make sure that you amend it to say all the board members called in via teleconference. I just cut and pasted from the past. I'm so used to putting that everybody's here, but I should have noted that you all called in via teleconference. So I'd request that change as well when you approve the consent agenda. And then other than that, if there are any questions on the bills, my report's complete. Thank you.
This is Melissa. I have a question that's slightly out of order. I have a question for Dr. Willert around if there's any updates for in regards to if we're going to have a pass-fail or grade system. Are there any updates about conversations around that? Because I know that parents are interested to understand what our strategy is going to be there.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. That's a great question. And what has been happening, and actually we'll have this all finalized, I envision, tomorrow. Our team is meeting tomorrow. When I say our team, the administrators. The K-8 principals have worked together to create a framework that would acknowledge progress made relative to the standards that are out there and that exist. That is probably not as complex as what our high school level is. And that's where Dr. Von Fisher and Dr. Jensen have been seeking some guidance and input, because there are some other implications when you start getting into the high school, things such as GPA, class rank, other factors such as NCAA eligibility items. So all of those factors are being considered. I envision that we will have a document ready to share with our public and our community as a whole that articulates how grades and grading will be handled for this last quarter. But like I said, we are moving more towards recognizing progress at the K-8 level, and at the high school level, if we can do a similar approach of recognizing progress without violating some of those other items that I just mentioned, that's what our intent would be to do as well. So just watch for more details on that to come, but that's what I can share at this time.
With regard particularly to the high school level, Clint, do you think there's going to be a lot of pressure to have a uniform system throughout the state, or is this going to basically end up being a district-by-district item to be handled?
The indications are that this is going to be a district-by-district response. I know that I've heard some districts discussing a pass-fail. I know that, for example, at the university level, it's my understanding that students have the option to choose a pass-fail on the grade that they have. They had to make a decision by a certain date on what option they wanted to exercise. Certainly a similar animal, but maybe a little bit different. I've started to explore that a little bit and understand how that model could possibly work for us. There are some districts that are saying things such as, well, a student's grade would never be lower than what their third quarter grade is. And certainly there's some challenges with that, particularly around engagement, because if I'm an A student and my grade can't be any lower than what it is at the end of third quarter, well, there's not much drive for me to remain engaged for the fourth quarter. So there are just a number of items that we want to talk through and work through as we consider the alternatives with grades and grading. And like I said, if there's a way that we could model something similar to what our university system is doing, where students can look at a pass-fail and be essentially held harmless relative to class rank, relative to GPA, there may be some benefit in applying that sort of a framework. But again, we haven't received any further guidance than that from the State Department of Education.
So, Melissa, whether you are or are not out of order, it was still a great, pesky question. It's going to be an interesting topic.
Yep, thanks for indulging me there.
Have we pretty well exhausted the 6.24, and we want to go to the calendar issue then, Clint?
Yeah, I believe that would be appropriate. And board members, this is just a point of discussion, and it's a point of discussion, as you'll note, for the 2021 school year. You heard me mention earlier that there's interest if indeed we can have a live graduation ceremony, pushing that back even into August if we needed to. And again, there's a lot of ifs laden into what I'm saying tonight. One of those ifs is if we're able to, and if we're not able to, that's probably a strong indicator that we may not be able to start school either in August. And in our call today with the Department of Education, Dr. Jones suggested as much that school districts should begin contemplating what other options or alternatives might be implemented if indeed we're not in a position to start school as we typically have at the start of the 2020-2021 school year. And I just wanted out there in the realm of board discourse, public discourse, that while we have adopted a school calendar that has us beginning in August, the board has the prerogative, and I would envision that we could discuss this in greater detail at future meetings and have a potential calendar alternative presented to the board that could start our school year into the latter part of September. And that would equate to a later dismissal into June. And I know that's something that nobody really wants to hear, because I know how treasured our summers are in South Dakota, because we know how long and endearing our winters are. But again, we're dealing with a situation that is absolutely unprecedented. And I just want to share with you as a board that you have the ultimate authority on the calendar adoption. And if indeed we are at a position where we could get kids into the school and have direct instruction via face-to-face, knee-to-knee, teacher-to-student in the classroom, I would much rather prefer our district to do that with a later start into September than moving forward in August and having to continue this pattern of remote learning, and then with the ultimate goal of ending school in May. So I wanted to put this on your radar and just give the board an opportunity to discuss it briefly tonight, understanding that there are many factors and implications that go into the school calendar, from things like we talked about with graduation to summer school, summer vacations, trips, camps, etc. All of those things could and ultimately would be impacted. But I believe that it's worth the price to pay if indeed we are able to start school, relatively speaking, normal into September, rather than rushing things if we're not able to in August. So that's what I wanted to share, and again, afford an opportunity for a little discussion by the board. As you noted, it is a discussion item.
I'm not sure there needs to be a lot of discussion on that item because we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen between now and then. The federal government has put out phase 1, 2, and 3, and actually you can start opening schools up in phase 1 if there's 14 days without any, recurring virus in your area. So I believe we just need to sit back and wait for guidance from our governor and the federal government on that.
Any other comment?
I think we're going to
Yeah.
have to wait. I mean, I think Roger's right on that. We'll have to wait and see what happens. However, I agree with you, Dr. Willard, that I would much prefer to see us start the school year in a traditional manner with everyone in the classroom, as opposed to remote learning in the fall. Again, I think that will be a real challenge for our families, and I think everyone's ready to get back in a classroom. So I'm hoping that that's the pathway we can take, and I would support the idea too of starting a little later and following that model as opposed to starting earlier with some distance learning.
And I would add that whatever the plan is, that we have go the extra mile to communicate that with our patrons.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's anxious even right now about that.
And I think it's appropriate to frame it up in the context that our most significant job is the best outcome we can possibly create for our students.
Good.
And that's why I agree with Roger's position that this is no time for us to tighten up and try to be rigid and try to make calls that we are just not capable of making. And I'm afraid it's true that it's somewhat against human nature, at least American human nature. People want to have schedules and they want to know what's what, when, and all this sort of thing. But we just can't deliver those answers, and I'm not sure when we will be able to. But at that point, then Wes's comment about kicking in with maximum communication takes place. Any other comments, or should we go to construction?
No, I appreciate that, and I wanted this to be something that our community is aware that as a district, we're mindful of what's developing and occurring, and I think the observations that were made and the suggestions that were made were absolutely spot on. I think we are in for more uncertainty yet for some time before we have clarity. And again, I just want our public to know that we're doing all that we can, given the information that we have today, to make the best decisions that we can. So with that, I think we're ready to move on, Van.
All right, 6.26.
Well, this is a little bit of a construction update, and I'll actually would draw your attention back to the report from the middle school administrators talking about the silver lining amidst everything that's happening with our remote learning. Without having students in the building, construction workers are getting ahead on some of the work, and that's with the intent to meet the August 2020 deadline. They've been working on doing some remodels. I have not been in the building because of the social distancing aspect. I have received some photos of some demo work that's been going on. And again, the work is going on in earnest. So I believe that good progress is being made, and it is with the intent that we would have school ready to start in August. One of the more significant portions of this project is the kitchen, and actually because of what's been happening with us being out of school, some of that kitchen work is actually able to start earlier as well, which is a real benefit because for those of you that have been through construction projects before, particularly whenever you involve a kitchen, there are so many dynamics from the electrical to the mechanical to just the factors of food management, health and safety inspections that you have to go through. Giving us more time on that kitchen is really significant and a benefit to the district. So, Brian, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add or share just from a couple of the meetings that have occurred.
Yes, just one thing. One of the things I'm going to endeavor to do is at the May board meeting, I'll do a budget presentation. It'll be very preliminary. But I'd like to try and estimate what I believe at the time in May when I do the budget, what will potentially end up carrying over in the construction project for the middle school. Because everything's been bid out and this equipment and fixtures have been ordered. So I should be able to come up with a pretty good idea of what we'll be able to carry over potentially when that project finishes, pending any major change orders. So I'm excited about that. Other than that, as Dr. Willard said, they're moving right along. Good start, and I believe they've even started on the track project as well. So very exciting news amidst all this turmoil. Good things are happening.
All right. Are we ready then to move into the consent agenda 7.0? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the modification that Brian asked for?
I so move.
I'll second it.
Question about this. Is there if there's an open enrollment report, I missed it in my preparation. Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as 7.5 in this packet?
Yes, there is, and
Holy cow!
there are 4 open enroll ends being requested.
I wonder how I managed to miss that. Well, I'll just go along with it. We have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. Motion carries. There are no items pulled from the consent, so now we'll proceed to Section 9.1. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to approve acceptance?
I move approval of the donated items.
I'll second that.
Comment, Clint?
Yeah, I'll just highlight that for those of you that you may be viewing at home that can't see, you can certainly log into the district website and find this information, but the district received a $1,000 donation for our special education disability awareness recognition. That was fantastic. Madera and Dakota Prairie each received Charities Aid Foundation $48.52 each. And then you heard me mention before the contribution, very significant contribution made by the Bobcat backers in support of our weight training facility at the high school, a $10,000 donation from the Bobcat backers to the Brookings High School weight room. So again, thanks to all those, the generosity and the support that ultimately impacts our students.
Paul? Motion passes. 9.2, approval of change negotiations. I'm sorry, approval to change negotiations to June of 2020.
I so move.
Second.
Clint?
As you note, there's not a date on this at this time. This just acknowledges that we would move the negotiations to June, and I believe we would want it as quickly on the heels of the special session as possible. So once we have that date set, I would endeavor to publish that as a date. We would utilize a doodle poll with the BEA, because we know that we would have to pull BEA members out from summer plans as well. And then certainly we'd have to determine how we can negotiate through distance learning, or distance tool, but that would be something we'd have to figure out. So with that being said, this would just change it to June, putting everybody on notice that that's when we'll endeavor to be finished with our contract negotiations. And again, putting it as close to possible of that special session.
So again, it's a tough situation, but the BEA has heard the situation, and they're willing to go along with it.
That is correct.
Okay, call the question. On my
It
screen,
hasn't
Deb,
come
you're
up
still
on,
out
yeah,
there.
it hasn't come up on my screen. It just still says under discussion. So why?
Deb, can you refresh your screen maybe? Or
Um,
hit your sync button maybe?
I did do that. I tried that. No, I'm
Well,
not
I'm gonna
getting.
try this.
Okay.
I'm gonna try something. Everyone, I'm gonna try this.
Start over.
Yep, I can clear and revote it.
Okay.
Is it showing up for you now, Deb?
No, it's not. I don't know why not.
Now, Wes, you didn't come on. Okay, now Wes is there.
Okay.
Is there
In fact,
some way,
I
Brian, that
can't
we
go.
can
My screen is almost locked. I can't move forward or backward.
Deb, do you think you might have lost connectivity at home?
I might have, because it's not moving forward or backward or anything. When I hit next item, it doesn't move forward or.
We'll do a
You didn't
voice vote then in acknowledgement, so, I guess.
I mean, I could try logging out and logging back in.
I can just.
Yeah, what?
You want me just to quick do a voice vote?
Well, do we have to do the whole enchilada, or just Deb?
Okay.
It will show up for the rest. I'm assuming everyone else voted yes. Deb, how would you vote?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I put all yes.
The next item is the certification plan of intent for Andrea Fish. Is there a motion and second for that item?
So moved.
I'll second it, Mr. West.
All right, discussion, Clint?
Yeah, I'll actually address both of these, because we have two of them this evening, Mrs. Fish and Mrs. Willert. As you'll notice, this is per an administrative rule that if there's somebody that is working outside of their current certification, that they would have a plan on file with the Department of Education. In September and October, the school district works with the Department of Education, and we fill out a personnel report that goes in. And then what will happen is if somebody is, by that PRF, it's called a PRF report, is deemed not to be teaching in an area in which they're certified, or teaching in an area that they're not certified for, we get noticed by the state, and then we've utilized this process with other educators in the past, so this isn't a new thing. Well, we did not receive notice from the state that we had any issues until March, kind of the earlier middle part of March, that we received this notification that these two individuals had a flag on their personnel report. The good news about both of them, both were working on and both have completed their program of study relative to the area of certification that they were flagged on. Mrs. Fish was flagged for her instruction in the tech area. She's since completed a master's in technology, and Mrs. Willard was flagged for her teaching English language learners at the elementary level, and she has completed her program of study for her EL endorsement through Dakota Wesleyan. And Mrs. Fish has received her degree in technology from Dakota State University. So both of those have either completed all the necessary work to get licensure. It's in process. I think Mrs. Fish has her licensure all completed. I think Mrs. Willard has hers all submitted, and it's in process. So I think everything is in order. It's just unfortunate with the timing that this came out now versus October, when it typically would if there were flagged issues.
Well, if there are no other questions or comments, the motion on the table is for Mrs. Fish. I'll call the question.
Well, now my name showed up, but not yes or no.
How are you doing, Melissa?
That's progress.
Yeah,
How you're doing?
but I vote yes.
All right, I'll put all yes.
I already voted.
Thank you, Deb.
Okay, the next item is approval of the certification plan of intent for April Willard, about which we just heard.
Need a motion, Mr. Chair?
A motion and second, please.
I so move on April Willard.
I second.
Is there any, excuse me, question or comment with regard to April? Then I'll call the question.
Okay, now I just have a bunch of computer language. I need Mrs. Fish maybe to help me with it.
Are you a yes,
I
Deb?
vote yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Deb, the good news is I know a guy.
I don't know what's happening, but I get the agenda item, but I don't have anything below it except for math, so.
Okay, now I'd like to discuss item section 9.5, approval to declare March 16, 18, 2020 as fulfilled contract days for salaried employees and a work holiday for hourly employees due to COVID-19, along with the 2 snow days, January 17th and February 12th. Is there a motion and second?
I move we approve that.
Second.
All right, we'd like to put some color on that, Glenn, please.
I'll put a little bit on, and then I'll let Brian as well. I know that specifically the days March 16 through the 18 were days that were acknowledged in our cabinet presentation to the board. I believe that was 2 weeks ago when we hosted the board meeting, where each of the cabinet members spoke. And like I said, Brian can give a little more comment about the implications of that, particularly for the hourly employees, because we had some that worked and some that didn't, so it becomes somewhat of an equity and equality issue. The other 2 days, the snow days, January 17th and February 12th, really address the fact that we would be continuing to extend our calendar, and oftentimes what we've done with those days is we've made those staff days. Well, we really don't have a need for those staff days per se, given the circumstances that we're under right now. So that's why you see those days being recognized as they are under this action item. The State Department has waived, or the state has waived under the authority of the governor, and by the action of the legislators, the requirements for the minimum number of minutes. The good news is that all of our buildings, except for the middle school, met and would continue to meet all the minimum number of required minutes by the state law. The middle school was impacted simply because of what happened with our impact of the start of the school year this year. And again, I don't think any of that changes given where we're at right now with the COVID situation and the remote learning plans. Again, I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything more about those 3 days in particular, 16, 17, and 18.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Willard. I'll just very briefly, what we're doing for the hourly staff on that did not work, or in some cases worked on March 16 through 18, we're putting either their scheduled hours as work holiday for those 3 days, or their average hours as work holiday for those 3 days. We had several staff, food service staff that came in and worked those days. Those staff are getting paid for their additional hours worked those days. Our custodial staff and other secretarial staff that came in and worked those 3 days, what we're gonna do, as well as the any administrative staff or supervisory staff or 12-month staff that work those 3 days, we're proposing to give them 3 work holidays, or considered comp days. So those 3 comp days could be made up anytime. With board approval, I'd like to go till July 31st, because to use 5 days up between now and June 30th was what I initially approved as I know it seems like a lot of time, but getting stuff ready, using some vacation as well, and personal leave, we'd like to extend it to July 31st for those staff to use those 3 comp days or work holidays. And what they would do is we just put on the computer a work holiday if they're hourly staff, and they just wouldn't show up. If it's other staff that are salaried, we'd request that they just turn in a sheet that says, I'm using this day as one of my work holidays. Did you want me to cover the 2 snow days as well? The 2 snow days, what my plan is for those, for hourly staff, mainly the TAs, secretaries, et cetera, that work during the school year and are part of the 178 days that school's in session. After May 20th, the 21st and 22nd, I will put in 2 days of work holiday for them as well. So that'll fulfill their days that they agreed to work, whether it's their average days they work for those 2 days or their regular scheduled shift. The same thing as mentioned earlier, the administrative staff, supervisory staff, and custodial staff, because most of them, and some secretarial staff, most of them worked those 2 snow days. We would give them 2 work holidays to use up until July 31st as well. And again, if they took the day off, they would just put work holiday on that day, put it on the time clock system. If they were salaried, they'd put work holiday, turn it in as a leave slip. And we would keep track to make sure that they got their full 5 days and didn't go above that as well for the work holiday. Any questions, or did I cover it well enough, or anything to add, Dr. Willard? It's just trying to make it as equitable as we can.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I'd just like to thank Brian for putting this all together and leading this effort to get a fairness factor in it.
Thank you, Wes.
Call the question.
Again, my name is there, but I didn't get the yes or no, but I approve, yes.
Thank you, Deb.
Okay, it passes 5-0. All right. Now we have the contract to which Clint referred to earlier in the meeting, approval of extension of STSU Lab School MOU. Need a motion and second, please.
So moved.
I second.
Okay, again, do you want to repeat anything, Clint, or expand on anything?
Nothing more to share than what I have already. I think it's just a prudent step to ensure that we can continue to move forward with the shared mutual intent of determining a pathway for the lab school that unfortunately was delayed because of the pandemic.
Not much controversy, I think, with regard to at least extending the contract. So I'll call the question. Deb, where are you? Yes or no?
Just for discussion, but I vote yes.
Okay, it passes 5-0. And the next item is a board thank you to staff for pandemic-related efforts. Motion? So moved.
I second it.
Okay, Clint?
Well, as we know, these are very unique and uncertain times, and what this recommendation is about was a generative discussion that occurred during the agenda setting time that we had with Deb and with Van and myself, talking about a way that we could recognize as a direct result of the pandemic the extra effort that all staff members across the district have made to take our system into a mode that it wasn't designed to do so. It wasn't designed to be delivered remotely, and we've figured out how to do it. I still think there's growth opportunities there. I still think there's some opportunity there, and our staff have just done incredible work to make that transition. And the idea is that we would provide a nominal recognition for staff, and this would authorize the administration to do so as an act of recognition for all the extra effort in response to the pandemic. And per the advisement of our Director of Business Services, what is being recommended is $100 for everybody that is 6/10 or higher, and $50 for anybody below 6/10 that is a regularly employed staff member of the district. So it wouldn't include like a referee that gets a compensation from the district because they're not a regularly scheduled employee of the district. So, and the intent is to utilize that as a recognition for our staff, again, in an appreciation for all the extra work that's gone on directly related to our pandemic response here in the Brookings School District.
Just to add what Dr. Willard said, it would be based upon staff that work consistently the same amount of hours. We would give the full bonus or the prorated bonus. So it would not include substitutes or playground supervisors. And if you're okay, I'd like, if Roger or Deb would make that as a friendly amendment so I could add the dollar amount to it. Is that okay?
That's fine with me, Brian.
Yep, and fine with me also.
Oh, thank you, Deb and Roger.
Okay, well then I'd like to open it up to the board for any further comments that any or each of you might have with regard to this action.
I just know there's been a lot of added responsibility and a lot of added communication efforts that have had been made by our teachers and all the work that they've done. I think this is a minimal way to show our thanks and support for all they've done.
And as I've said before, there's a lot of leadership that's involved in getting this done, and so it's recognizing everybody's individual leadership.
I would add also that it was a miracle enough that the amazing staff were able to figure out a way to feed our students, get internet to our students, and get devices to our students in such a short amount of time. But also just completely revamping the educational delivery system and getting, not allowing our students to lose all of that time and just not giving up. I know that every member of our staff has been put into an odd and irregular position where they have to feel wildly uncomfortable, but I can tell you as a mom, my students, on top of all of that our staff are doing, my students are feeling loved, cared for. They've been commenting about how much their teachers have missed them. I'm just, is this a perfect process? Absolutely not. It couldn't be under the circumstances, but I am so impressed and I'm so thankful. I just can't imagine that anyone else has better staff than we do in the Brookings School District. So I support this 100%, and I'm just eternally grateful.
Well, I can't say it any better than Melissa just said it, but
Yeah.
as Clint went through the administrative reports, I was just in awe of the amount of work and the amount of professionalism of, and Wes said it, leadership, the principals and the food service director and all the folks that had a part in what they had to do in such a small amount of time. I think we took, 4 days to put it together. I mean, I was just incredibly impressed the first time I heard it, and every time I hear more reports of what you folks are doing, I just can't say it how proud I am of the staff, the whole staff, not just the teachers, but the cooks and the food service folks and the bus drivers, etc. So, big rah-rah for all of them.
And I think there's a few that have a career in their future with all the videos I've been seeing. There's been some very creative, impressive videos.
Yeah, I don't know about
I
that.
hope they don't leave teaching.
Are there any other comments?
I just wanted to thank the business office staff when we found out about this. We have to have our payroll done tomorrow by 4. So we teamed up and we got all the dollar amounts in, and it will be in their staff paychecks next Tuesday when we run payroll.
Well, excuse me, I'd like just to say, and I'm not sure if I can get through this without choking up or not, but in addition to the strange times that we're living in, I just feel like our, so to speak, figuratively, area has been hit with a meteor. And all of a sudden, look at what has happened. And it is truly, truly humbling to see how everybody in the district responded, and they just, got their shovel out and started to work. And I want to acknowledge the fact that $100 it's intended as a thank you. It's intended as a gesture of appreciation. It's not intended to compensate all of you people for the thousands of hours, hundreds of hours at least, that you've put into this thing. So Deb and I were just kind of racking our brains trying to figure out, well, what could we do a little bit of to at least acknowledge how deeply the board appreciates the efforts of the entire staff. I'll call the question.
Again, my name is there, but I don't have yes or no, but I definitely vote yes.
That is a surprise. All right, thank you. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move adjournment.
Second.
Call the question.
And I did do one last check just to make certain there were no public comments that were made, and Amanda did respond that there were none. So board members, thank you again for your willingness to step into this space of uniqueness as we seek to continue to do the board's work, and I appreciate that as well, so thank you.
And I vote yes for adjournment as well, even though my vote's not there.
Well, you were leaving us hang there, Deb. We weren't sure if this meeting was ever going to end.
Well, there was 4 votes.
Are you?
Yes, we're okay.
Brian, can I hit the end meeting button on mine then?
You sure can, we're done, thank you.
Yeah, we're finished.
Thank you.